Malcolm X said the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. So are you prepared for your next big leadership move? That's the mission of the 19th Annual Women's Leadership Conference on August 31st and September 1st at the MGM Grand Conference Center. Unite with a community of women and men, all professionals committed to growing their skills, their influence, and their impact. So they're ready to step into new horizons in their careers. Because great leaders never stop thinking, learning, and evolving. They're made, not born. To attend this year's Women's Leadership Conference, visit fwle.org today.
Today on CityCast Las Vegas, we're diving into Governor Lombardo's traffic stop, a wild marriage scam story, explaining why the Venetian was hit with a $7.2 million fine, and diving into Flavor Flav's She Weekend Parade down on the Strip. Criminal defense attorney David Figler and NPR's regional reporter in the Mountain West News Bureau, Yvette Fernandez, are jumping on board for today's discussion. It's Thursday, July 16th. I'm Jesse Merrick, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Hey, shout out to all of our listeners out there. Before we get to today's conversation, I've got a favor to ask. CityCast is doing an annual listener survey and would really help us out if you took it. This is our chance to learn more about you and what you want from us here at CityCast Las Vegas so that we can serve you and Vegas better. If you took it last year, please do it again because we can't use last year's data anymore. So if you're down to share your thoughts, go to citycast.fm/survey to take it. Now, we did time it out and it only takes 7 minutes, so it won't take too much of your time. And for your time, you'll be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and some CityCast swag as well. So again, to take that listener survey and help us out, go to citycast.fm/survey. All right, so let's dive into today's discussion. Yvette, David, thank you both for joining us today. How's it going?
Hey, Jesse. Hey, David.
Going good, man. Vegas never gets old or boring.
Never. And today we have so much to talk about. We've actually got 4 topics in a sense, and right off the rip, a very interesting one. Did you guys see the video of Joe Lombardo getting pulled over? I would love your thoughts on this.
David, do you want to go first since you're the attorney?
Yeah, no, I'm telling all my clients now when they get stopped by the cops, just say, come on, man. And it goes away. It's kind of, it's a nice precedent that has begun. Do you want to describe it, Jesse, or, so for the few people who haven't seen it yet or who won't see it in many campaign commercials, I think, to come?
Oh, yeah. I think it'll be coming for sure. I think, look, when you go back and look at it, the video itself, like a normal traffic stop, but then when the cop jumps up there to trying to explain what's going on and everything like that, the thing that gets me is Lombardo jumps in, like throws his finger in the air and says, "I'm Joe Lombardo." Like, that's where I was like, whoa, wait, what? Like, and it wasn't like a hello, sir, good day to you, back and greeting the officer. It was a butting in, trying to use kind of your standing as the governor of Nevada. I think that's where people are irked. And then also too, David, to your point, the come on, man, as you responded, and the officer said, like, acknowledged that he knew who Lombardo was or knew it was him. And as he left, there was no thank you for like, hey, thanks for not popping me for the ticket or anything like that. I think any other normal, quote unquote, citizen would have been like, hey, thanks, I appreciate it, all that stuff, because it sucks getting pulled over, even if it is for something ticky-tacky.
Well, actually, I saw 3 different things that sort of stood out to me. One was, do we think that this doesn't happen?
Yeah,
we know
everybody,
that,
right?
No, but I mean, we know that people in position will usually try to say, this is who I am, just so you know, so he did that.
But if you ever are the, like, do you know who I am, guy or girl, like, that's never going to point out well for you, right? I mean,
I guess every once in a while it must work. But then what was interesting to me is that, then the officer says, I'm aware, so he knew. Yeah. But then right after that, that's where it got interesting to me, because then he continued to say why he stopped him. And then he was done with that. Then he looked down at what appeared to be like he was checking his body camera. And so to me, it seemed like once he said that, then he said, okay, you're good to go. So it felt like what he was doing was covering himself, making sure that he fulfilled what he needed to do because he knew he was being recorded, and then completed what he had to do and then said, okay, you're good to go.
So I think we should set the stage too of like the whole reason this happened is because, he didn't come to a complete stop while making a turn on a red light. By my understanding, essentially the California roll just instead of at a stop sign at a red light. And so I think, look, like to that point, this happens every day to normal citizens, to where like you're going to get pulled over something like this and it is a warning. The interaction, I think, was a bit more sped up than it probably would have been for a normal citizen, correct?
Yeah, maybe.
Definitely.
I think a lot of people like us over the next couple of days, at least, are going to be analyzing this thing like the Zapruder film. You know, we're going to be listening to the tone of the command man, whether or not the officer felt intimidated or not, or if it was just a courtesy. We could speculate all day long. The Lombardo camp has released a statement that basically said, nothing to see here. The Police Protective Association, the union for the cops who have been supporting Lombardo throughout, said, oh, yeah, this happens all the time. Don't worry about it, which is kind of an odd position for police to take. But I think that the bigger issue that maybe lasts longer is, Lombardo used to be the head of the police down here. He was the sheriff before he was the governor. And, questions might arise as to whether there is a sort of culture of giving elected officials a break that was instilled under his watch. And if this is just one little small part of it. Look, you also have to remember that the current sheriff, Kevin McMahill, has made one of his banner issues, like the reason for a lot of the things that he's doing with regard to the tech that you've talked about on CityCast in the past, and his legislation that he's probably going to try to encourage in the next session, is all about people not paying attention at red lights, specifically red lights. That's like his whole deal. So, I mean, I wonder if someone's going to go over to the sheriff and say, what do you think about the governor? Your officer, you got to trust that they knew what they saw. The governor blowing through a red light, or making a turn on a red without stopping, whatever the allegation is, I wonder if it puts McMahill and Lombardo at odds because of the way that it came down. I just wonder if this opens up, the Ford campaign, which is his opponent, the current attorney general, who is also, involved in some degree of law enforcement, to, make a bigger issue out of a culture that was fomented under Lombardo himself when he was the sheriff.
I think more than anything in the court of public opinion, this is essentially a look at Lombardo in an unplugged moment, and maybe the only time that a lot of voters maybe out there, or just people in the general public, get a look at Lombardo. Quite frankly, how many of them are really doing the digging, and looking into where his stance is on things, what he's running on, all those different things, because this is obviously getting a ton of attention. But to David's point there, Yvette, what do you think the folks on the Democratic side of things are going to do with this in terms of running with it? Do you think AG Ford touches it, or maybe is it more so one of those things where the PACs really get involved? I'd imagine we're going to see a lot of commercials coming out on this one, right? It seems like low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely. I think both camps are going to use this to their advantage in one way or another. I mean, we're already seeing a lot of news releases that are coming out, not only from the individuals from Lombardo's camp, as well as Ford's camp, as well as the Republicans and the Democrats. So they're definitely going to be using this. You remember last time around, they used his wearing his uniform during campaign, and some of his campaign material, if you will, saying that was inappropriate. So any little thing, and this has really gotten a lot of legs, has really essentially gone viral. So I think that is definitely going to be a tool that they're going to use.
Yvette, I think in normal circumstances, you're right, but I don't know how that plays in Nevada. I haven't seen anything direct yet, and it is early from Ford himself about this incident. I'm sure their social media people are going overtime to see if it might have some aspect to it that could be used. But, in the last election when Sisolak ran against Lombardo, a lot of stuff was kind of hands off, and they, for whatever reason, didn't touch on to his cop stuff. Not at all. And I don't know that Ford has an appetite for that. Maybe it doesn't poll well. I am curious to see if it does have the legs that I think normally it would, but here, hard to say.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing I think we're all going to be watching, of like how much of a part of the process it actually becomes, or lack thereof, to your point, which will be fascinating in either way of it. We've got an interesting marriage scammer deal that went down in Vegas, and there are just so many interesting nuggets weaved within this one. David, can you set the table for us real quick about what exactly is going on here?
Sure. Let's just start from the facts that we know. There was an individual in our community. I'm not going to try to say her first name because I don't want to get it wrong, but her last name is Chen. So we'll call her Ms. Chen, although she is Mrs. maybe 6 times over without ever not being a Mrs. So that's the allegation here, is that she was putting herself out mostly on those apps and luring fellas in for quick seduction and marriage, actual going down and getting a marriage certificate, and then utilizing that, presumably intimate relationship to get a bunch of money under false pretenses. In other words, she said that she had all these expenses, mostly related to sick relatives back in China, where she was from. And that turned out to not be accurate. And then it was revealed that she had married time and time again without getting divorced, which is called bigamy. And it is against the law in Nevada. Go figure. Even Nevada has laws against marrying multiple people at the same time. So these allegations actually go back to 2024. That's when she was first charged. I took a look at the record. It looked like she might have kind of jumped bail for a little while, but continued to go get married anyway. Then, in June, she kind of got brought back into custody. They sort of unraveled it. It looked like there was about 6 people at the same time that she might have been married to, maybe 5. And then quickly, she entered into a plea negotiation, and now she's probably looking at a probation situation with a bunch of bells and whistles that we could talk about. But the case is set to be resolved with a sentencing just in the next couple of months.
Yvette, I am so curious your take on this because it just seems like obviously here in Vegas, we've got very loose, marriage laws and things like that, or at least it's very easy to get married here in Vegas. Does it seem like Vegas is the best place to pull a scam like this? Like, how much does that factor into that it happened here and why she did this whole thing in the first place?
I think it does factor into it. I mean, we know that, the marriage department, if you will, they've even, put up pop-up marriage license spots at the airport. So it is very easy to get married here in Las Vegas, and I think that just helps to facilitate that. But overall, this is a fraud scheme, is what it is. And it used to be that these kinds of getting married schemes were about, maybe it was an immigration situation. Maybe you needed to try to gain, legal status in this country so you could marry somebody to do that. But gambling can also be a reason. And, we know from the statistics that calls to gambling addiction centers, both on the federal level and as well as statewide, have increased significantly. So maybe this is also about problem gambling, like definitely, David was talking about. It could be, just any number of things. It's never just what it appears on the surface. It's just a much deeper situation.
Are we discounting, Jesse, that this could just be about love? That the government's just getting in the way of love here? Maybe she loved too hard, too much.
She filed so many different marriage applications and things like that. And one of the quotes was that she didn't always marry the men when they were listed, or the men that were listed on the marriage applications because, quote, not everyone pays. That tells you all you need to know. Love was not a factor. Maybe. It's about the money, baby.
Love in Vegas comes in many forms. I don't think the government should get in the way of people's love.
Nah.
I'm playing, but am I?
All right. Having said that, though, to Yvette's point, I think, again, got to look at all the different layers of this one. Gambling, how easy it is to get married here, all those different things. There's so many ripple effects of this that go into why she did it and everything. But yeah, sad story overall for the folks who got scammed. Hopefully it all gets wrapped up.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of annulment and divorce proceedings that are going on right now, too. I'll tell you that.
All right, let's keep it rolling now. We're talking a lot about money, controversies, all this stuff in today's show. Now let's dive into the Venetian having to pay a $7.2 million fine. Yvette, what's the deal there?
Well, what we do know right now is that the current operators of the Venetian Hotel, they agreed to pay a $7.2 million fine to Nevada gaming regulators over illegal gambling activities that were tied to a convicted bookmaker, Matthew Boyer. But the Venetian is not the only strip casino that was subject to this fine in connection with his gambling, according to the published court documents. I mean, there were 3 other casinos that also had fines levied against them for the same reason, against the same person. So what's interesting to me was that the gaming officials, they accused Boyer of laundering money from his bookmaking, but they are holding the casinos accountable. And I think that's the interesting part of it. The Gaming Control Board, and I just want to read you this quote, alleged there were, quote, instances of failure of control within the casino where information of suspicious or illegal activity in relation to Boyer was disregarded. And this seems so baffling because the gaming industry is so highly regulated. And I mean, for the rest of us, when we walk into a casino, we know we are being watched by all the cameras throughout the casino. And this gambler, Boyer, who had been on the ban list, was allowed to continue to play. And now the casinos are paying multi-million-dollar fines.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, there's a report there that one of the casino hosts knew sometime around 2019 or early 2020 that Boyer was an illegal bookmaker. So obviously there was knowledge there. Why wasn't he reported and all those things? Like, they're supposed to do that. So I guess, David, why do you think it took so long for the Venetian to report him?
Well, there was an investigation that was going on. I don't know if the Venetian spontaneously reported things without there being stuff buzzing around all over the Strip involving lots of employees who, as I understand it, bounce between properties. I mean, it caused the president or CEO, Sabella, of Resorts World to not just be federally indicted, but to basically lose his gaming license, at least for now, and his job, obviously. Look, there is a huge incentive for casinos to make as much money as possible. And I think there has been a culture over the last 10 years of, at least, if not to the beginnings of time, to look the other way as to where people's money is coming from. You know, just to get back to problem gambling for a second, I'm sure there's a lot of people who have lost a lot of money in casinos who probably shouldn't have been there in the first place because of problem gambling disorders or something that was quite obvious to the operators, but they kind of overlooked it because they were a good customer. And you know, the Gaming Control Board and the Nevada Gaming Commission, they can lay down the rules, especially as it relates to money laundering or the sources of income, but it's always going to be up to the individual properties to enforce it. And unless they are being highly scrutinized on a steady basis, looking at customer bases, looking at, you know, the big spenders in casinos, the whales, as we used to call them lovingly, and to where they're getting their money from and whether or not they either can afford it or whether it's coming from ill-gotten gains, it's almost an impossible task. And so you're really asking...
that's the thing. Sorry to jump in there, but like, is there a way to enforce this better for gaming regulators to enforce these rules better? Because even when you look at it on the surface level, $7.2 million doesn't seem like a ton. I know that they're reporting that he lost like $3.6 million to the Venetian, so technically double what he lost there, double what they took in from him. But it still feels kind of light, you know, and I know it's $34 million total to the properties down on the Strip. Is there a way to enforce this better rather than just letting it be, you know, at the casinos' discretion to do a lot of this stuff?
This is a choice, really, because when they want to be proactive and enforce something, they will. And enforcement is a big part of what goes on in the casinos. I mean, really, that speaks to the heart of, you know, the current debate also going on between gaming regulators and, you know, prediction market apps, which is all about regulation and who controls the revenue. I mean, the Nevada Gaming Control Board, you know, they file lawsuits against Kelshi, Polymarket, and others to prevent them from operating in this state. And even other states are joining in. Arizona actually filed criminal charges against them. And, you know, just recently, former Nevada Senator Dean Heller recently came out not only in support of prediction markets, but as an advisor to Kelshi. I mean, these are all choices that they are making as to where they're going to pick their fight. So they didn't decide to pick their fight with this person who was even blacklisted, but they are coming out, you know, guns a-blazing when it comes to prediction market apps. And I think that's really, you know, it shows the difference in where they're determining to put their efforts and their money. You know, earlier this year, there was a prediction market developers conference that was held here in Las Vegas. And ironically, not at a casino resort, of course. But in talking with some of them, I mean, they're raking in millions and billions of dollars that are coming in. And, you know, for them, their perspective is, well, their prediction, if I can use that, is that this
see what you did there.
You like that?
Yeah.
Is that this is going to be an argument that is going to make it all the way to the Supreme Court because they're of them trying to make that decision, that regulatory decision. Is this gambling, which falls within the traditional gaming regulations like here in the state, or is this part of is it trading like it is with the FTC? And that's where this divide is taking place. So what I'm saying is these decisions are about regulation and revenue, and all these entities are having to take sides and decide where they're going to, post their flag, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that, and revenue is a big part of the decision-making process.
All right, so enough of the real controversial stuff. Now let's talk about something cool going down on the Strip, okay? Flavor Flav is throwing a party down there on the Strip, and here's the background on all of it, okay? Back in February during the Winter Olympics, both the U.S. men's and women's hockey teams won gold medals. President Trump called the men's team to congratulate them and jokingly said he would also have to invite the women's team to the State of the Union or he'd face impeachment. As you can imagine, that landed flat. The backlash was immediate. And the women's team captain, Hillary Knight, called it a, quote, distasteful joke, and they declined the invitation. Then that's when Flavor Flav stepped in. The rapper tweeted that if the U.S. women's hockey team wanted a real celebration, he would host them here in Las Vegas, saying he'd make sure they had nice dinners, went to shows, all the good times, you name it. He was going to make sure they had it. And then what started as a tweet turned into something much bigger. Delta, MGM Resorts, StubHub, Dove, and all kinds of other major brands stepped up on board. And the GoFundMe was even started by Flavor Flav, which has raised nearly $140,000. And the event has been expanded to celebrate top women athletes across multiple sports, all across the Olympic sports and things like that. And now it's finally happening. They're calling it She Weekend. It kicks off on Thursday night with a parade starting at 8 p.m. It'll run from Park MGM, heading down the Las Vegas Boulevard for just a little bit there, then turning into Bruno Mars Drive and ending at Toshiba Plaza right outside T-Mobile Arena, where Public Enemy and artist Blue the Tiger will perform. There will also be a Key to the Strip presentation and an official proclamation for the athletes as well. All told, it's a 4-day celebration. It will include private dinners, shows, and events throughout the weekend. So this is kind of just the start of things, but this is the most forward-facing part of the event that's going to be going down. I feel like it's been made a pretty big deal, and it's cool this is going on, but it also sounds like it's maybe not getting as much attention now that it's actually coming here. Do you guys think this is getting the attention that it deserves right now?
It is not getting the kind of attention it deserves. And I think that's been part of the thread that has gone through women's sports for many, many years. I mean, we are finally starting to see, women athletes get a little bit more recognition. We're starting to see that in particular with some of the women's sports teams that we have here. And they've all come out even publicly of talking about that and the recognition that they deserve, and they are, on a point by point basis, if you will, really standing up alongside, men's leagues, if you will. There's a very broad statement, but you can see the disparity between, how much funding and investment men's sports get in general and how much funding women's sports get. And so to me, I think that what this shows is, sometimes celebrities do use their platform for good, and this seems like an example of that. It may be small and it may still need to grow, and I think it will. But I saw him do an interview, Flavor Flav do an interview, and he said that he was inspired to do this because he's a girl's dad. And so he wanted to do more to basically shine a light on women and women's sports. And I can just give him kudos for that.
I mean, it does beg the question, how do you help hype the best hype man in the business, maybe of all time?
Yes. Well put.
I think that the county should actually abandon the recently christened Bruno Mars Street or whatever it's called and just make it Flavor Flav Street, because he is our hometown
Flavor Flav
hero.
Avenue or something like that.
Yeah, why not? Flavor Flav
boy drive.
Full disclosure, of course, to longtime listeners to CityCast, they know that I represented Flavor Flav with other attorneys for many, 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 many years. I'm a huge fan of his as a person. He was a great client as well. And, I think he's not doing it for the attention, although I think he wants to draw more attention to women's sports and in particular these stellar athletes who have just done so much at the Olympics, bringing home all this pride and glory and gold to the country. But it really is about treating them well, having them have a treat yourself weekend on him, you know, and all the people who have supported him. And I don't know if it matters that people are going to show up at the parade or not. I hope that they do tonight. But I think it's really just about acknowledging them and showing them that not only are they worthy of all the lavish praise and attention and cool stuff, but that Vegas in particular is a good place to celebrate this kind of stuff. I think it's a win-win for the community. And it didn't take, you know, the Convention and Visitors Authority to do it. It was Flav basically doing it on his own.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm a fan of Flav. I got to make sure I throw that out there. I interviewed him a ton when I was at Channel 3, and we've interacted a bunch. Just seems like a genuine good dude, and I do think he's doing this out of the kindness of his heart. And I think, too, also with, you know, our city jumping on board and jumping behind it, just kind of follows a trend of, like, to Yvette's point, like, women's sports nationally doesn't get the attention that it should deserve, that it should get, that it's earned, I think. But here in Las Vegas, I feel like we've supported women's sports at a different level, particularly when it pertains to the Aces. They've won 3 championships. We've thrown 3 different championship parades down on the Strip, shutting down the Strip, which, like, think about it, of anybody that doesn't live in Vegas. If you live in Oklahoma or somewhere in Florida, you hear the portion of the Strip, no matter how small or large it is, you hear that the Strip is being shut down in any way, shape, or form. That's massive. And we've now done that for 3 different parades for the Aces in particular. And again, putting on for these female athletes as well as they come to Vegas, I think just shows that, like, not only are we the epicenter of sports and entertainment, but I think we're one of the, you know, markets that are probably leading the charge of supporting women's sports. And I think that deserves a lot of recognition. And I think we've done a really good job in that factor to kind of pat ourselves on the back. Yes, it could be done bigger and grander and all those things. But also, too, it's only year 1 of this. Maybe this is something that we could do yearly, something that we use as kind of like planting our flag for women's sports. David, you noted wanting to change the name of Bruno Mars Drive there. Maybe we could do something like that. Yvette, if it was something that maybe were to become like a yearly event, what would you like to see done more to kind of draw more attention to it and make this even bigger?
You know, I think we have the infrastructure here in Las Vegas for that. I mean, we've seen so many of these kinds of events that support local efforts, even just naming Bruno Mars Street, Mars Street. You know, that was a big event. It was a parade, et cetera. And we've done this for all these other events. We can do a little bit better and a little bit more to continue to support women athletes and women's sports. And again, like to your point of what you said, yes, it is becoming, we're sort of like the beacon in a way of holding women's sports up to a new level. And I think that we can continue with that charge. And you hear these stories all the time from fans of women's sports who talk about that, who talk about the small things like just being able to see people who look like them in sports, being able to see, trying to find, you know, even T-shirts that have the names of the athletes that they admire on there. That's a challenge for them. So there's a lot of things that we could do, and they could be even small steps like that. So Las Vegas is in a great position to do that, to be supportive.
Yeah, so hey, hopefully we see it come back next year, and like we said, become, you know, a regular occurrence here in Las Vegas. I think that would be awesome for all involved. Yvette, David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jesse.
That was fun. Thanks, Jesse.
That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our free morning newsletter as well. And don't forget, you can support this show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Las Vegas neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Las Vegas. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Until then, though, take care.